one of our core values is radically respect. And in that core value, there's some bullet points underneath of it. And one of them is be kind, not nice. Too often, I feel like, especially in the impact space, like we're so nice all the time. Like, I just want to be nice to you. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. But being kind allows us to come to the table and have our differences and talk things out and work together and be respectful and appreciate the perspective that each person brings to a conversation or to a challenge.
Welcome to another episode of the Leading to Fulfillment podcast, where everything we talk about is meant to encourage people-first leaders, empower individuals to achieve fulfillment, and help your organizations become places people love to work. I'm your host, James Laws, and I have a fantastic show in store for you. My guest this episode is Cheryl Gillihan. Cheryl is a leader, speaker, a veteran. She focuses on using technology for good and has been recognized by Real Leaders magazine as a top impact leader. Cheryl joined Cause Labs in 2010, has grown within the company as a leader, strategist, and cultural ambassador. Cheryl has served as a Girl Scout leader for 10 years, sits on several advisory boards, and empowers and equips leaders and project managers around the world on the successful rapid problem-solving process she has pioneered with the team at Cause Labs. In my conversation with Cheryl, we discuss what does it mean to be a leader both internally and externally for your business, the challenges of transitioning from contributor to primary leader, the journey of Cause Labs as they more fully found their cause, the decision to be a B Corp and a public benefit corporation, and how it impacts the company's culture and its values, and so much more. But first, I want to invite you to subscribe to the Leading to Fulfillment podcast in your favorite podcast tool. We're on Apple and Google Podcasts, we're on Spotify, and you can even watch us over on YouTube. And if we're not where you like to watch podcasts, just let me know, and I will fix it right away. Now, let's dive in to my conversation with Cheryl Gillihan. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
James, it's so awesome to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, when I got ready to do this show, I was just getting started with the podcast. I made a list of all the people that I wanted to have as guests on the show. Your name was on this list. And I had it on the list, but I was just waiting. You know, we hadn't spoken in a really long time, and I was waiting for the right opportunity to reach out to you. And then I saw a post on Instagram by you where you had talked about a recent award for leadership that you had won. And I was wondering, would you please share with us a little bit about that award and what it meant to you?
So this is the second year that we've received it. We've applied 3 years. We didn't get it the first year. The second year, which was 2020, and a really tough year, actually, with the pandemic, we actually received it for the first time. And I remember when I got the notification about it, I was so excited when I announced it to the team because, it's always embargoed information. Like, you can share it with your team, but don't share it with anybody else. And I shared it with the team, and I was almost crying. I had so many happy feelings and happy tears. And I told the team, I was like, this is better than being on the cover of Forbes. It's like, this is so incredible. And you think Forbes business leader, like, this is it. This is like, I made it, right? But when I heard about the Real Leaders Award, and it's not like we're number one, we're not going to be. Tesla's number one, right? We're not Tesla, we're a small company. But it was one of those wow, I'm on a list that, Tesla's on. But two, also recognizing that every company that is on that list has some sort of social impact within their business, and they've made that a priority. And so to be on that business list versus any other business list was just a moment for me of really achieving something great. and really aligned with my values. So, at a time when business was really hard because of the pandemic and contracts getting canceled and things like that, it was kind of that wind in my sails to say, like, this is why I'm in business. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I make the decisions that I make.
Congratulations on that award. I think that's really cool. It's cool to know somebody to achieve something that is so cool, and to see that pride in it. When I think about leadership, I always think there's this two sides of leadership. There's the leadership in a company that you project outward externally. It's the leadership of leading the team to everyone, leading the company to everyone who sees your company. And then there's the version of leading your team within the company. How do you think about leadership when you think about those two individual kind of roles to be like this leadership face of your organization? And what does leadership mean to you internally as you turn that towards your team to give them the clarity and the guidance they need to do amazing things?
So, can I give you a third scenario there?
I love it. Yeah.
um, I think for me, because not that I never aspired to be in a leadership position, but I didn't necessarily want to be CEO. In fact, I think the first time I met you at a retreat full of CEOs, and I showed up and I said, I was supposed to just be the plus one sitting here drinking margaritas, but now I've been asked to enter into this position, and I don't know if I'm going to say yes. Some people are like, why wouldn't you say yes? That's crazy that you wouldn't accept the CEO position being offered it within your company. And I thought, it's just so scary. Like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I don't know how to be a CEO. I've never been a CEO before. I care about the company, but there's a lot that comes with that. And there is a burden that comes with leadership. And so I think I had to do a lot of soul searching for myself on whether or not I wanted that. And then when the opportunity came up to own the company, that one was a little bit easier to say yes to, but at the same time, I didn't know how to be an owner. And there were a lot of things that I wasn't responsible for as the CEO, but all of a sudden I was definitely responsible for as the owner of the company. And so for me, not being in this role, from the outset, I didn't form the origination of this company. Leadership has been more about leading myself and making sure that I am making decisions that are aligned with the things that I'm passionate about, the values that I hold, and that the company continues to allow me to live out those values. And so I wouldn't say that, I'm a trained leader. I mean, I did business in college, but that's just book knowledge. That's not practical knowledge. I would say for me, it's hard for me to lead a team. There are some natural components of that just in my personality, but I would say that there are still things that I'm challenged with, like hiring people, letting people go, like some of these things that we have to do as owners of a company. I'm still learning how to do those things. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily like the expert leader in doing that. And who is really in all the
Of
things?
course. Yeah.
That's why we hire teams that, have more expertise than us in those areas. But knowing my values, that's an area where I can stay strong and really maintain
Yeah.
that, and making business decisions towards that. Leading with compassion and really working with my team and reminding them, like, are we living into those core values today? I think that's how I lead both internally and externally, so that I can be my whole self no matter where I am, because I don't want to present a different face internally than I do externally. I'm just Cheryl all the time, no matter where I am. And you're going to get that transparency regardless of which environment I'm in.
You, this gives us an opportunity to actually talk about something that I don't know that I've had the opportunity to have a conversation about, which is I talk to people who take on leadership roles within a company. I've talked to people who are leaders who started their company from scratch, but you have this unique experience of coming into the role, the big seat of an organization that had a dynamic leader who was leading it and leading it well, but now was passing the mantle and you were stepping into this role. What were the challenges of that transition? What were the things that you found yourself, maybe the struggles that you had the most to learn? As you said, now I'm the owner and the leader. And like and actually it was probably a multifaceted step for you, right? Because it was, first I was the leader, now I'm the owner, now I'm the, like, what was that experience like? Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Oh, yes, it definitely was multifaceted. The first day I became the leader, when I took over as CEO, I went to that conference, I met you, I had great discussions with you and a whole bunch of other leaders, came home, said, okay, I'm going to say yes. And I said yes. And the next day they gave me all the things and all the keys. And I had access to QuickBooks all of a sudden. And I was like, oh crap. What did I get myself into? And the company was not in a great place at the time. And I remember thinking, I don't have anybody to talk to about this. Like, I hadn't established myself sort of in that leadership community yet to where I had peers or a mastermind or anything where I could go to other CEOs, other owners, and share the experience of like, what do I do with this? I don't really know what I'm getting myself into. And at the same time, I couldn't go to my team because while I'm a very transparent person and I would have willingly gone to my team, Michael, who is my partner in business and in life, was like, there are some things you're going to scare them. There are some things that are your burden to bear. Because I think as a leader, there's also this level of perspective of it's going to be okay. It feels scary right now. There's a lot of emotion attached to whatever decisions I'm going to have to make. But in the long run, everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to work this out. We're going to figure out a plan. And that's a piece of leadership that I think maybe I've always had the capacity for, and I'm continuing to grow my capacity for it, is that level setting of having a vision and having strategic thinking and just being able to lay it out in a way like, we can't solve this problem in one day. We can't solve this problem with one decision, but we can solve this problem. And that's a piece of leadership that I think that I've learned over time. When I took over as ownership, it was a little bit easier. There was a lot more excitement involved in that. I have been with the company for, 12 years now. And so the clients, have seen me grow in this journey. Some of our clients have been with us for a very long time. Some maybe for that full tenure of 12 years. And so they have seen me sit in many different seats. And when I took over ownership in 2018, when Michael and I bought the company, it was this celebration of like, it's about time. We're so excited that you own the company. And there was a lot of joy around that event, and a lot of ability to say, okay, well, now the things I need to figure out is what kind of company do I want to grow? Because now the vision for where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years? That's now my vision. It's now
Yeah.
Michael's vision. It's now our vision as a family and our legacy. And so that transition was a little bit different, and is one that we're still trying to figure out, I think, because as a tech company, tech evolves so quickly. And so the vision that we set can't necessarily be tied to the tools that we're using. They have to be tied to something that's a little bit more intangible, of the impact that we want to create in the world.
I think that's so true, right? You hear so many people talk about creating their 10-year, their 5-year roadmap. And I'm like, you can create it, but it ain't going to be true. Like when you get to 5 years, if depending on how concrete you try to make that, like the industry moves so fast. 1 year, 3 years, maybe, but at 5 years, it starts to get fuzzy. It's good to have an idea. You should set something, but just hold it loosely and let it evolve and change as you get closer to that time. I also liked what you said about, as a leader, our responsibility in a lot of ways is, one, sometimes we do have to hold information back because it is our burden to bear. And the rest of the team might not be able to take it. It might actually be detrimental to the team if they get too much of that information. But there is a level of honesty that has to be there, and confidence. So this idea that, hey, things are rough, but we can persevere. We can get through this together. So I love that kind of addition of honesty and confidence as you transition through this. And you had a rough, people talk about onboarding into an organization. Some companies do onboarding really badly. Onboarding into CEO and owner is a rough transition.
It is.
So tell us a little bit about Cause Labs and what you do, and why you're so passionate about the business that you are leading and that you own.
So we're a web agency, and it's a dime a dozen. Like, there's so many web agencies out there, right? But our specialty is really working on impact projects and working with organizations that are growing positive impact in the world. So most people that talk to us think we only work on nonprofit websites, which a lot of our clients are nonprofits. But interestingly, I believe personally, because we are a public benefit corporation, we are a for-profit company, any business can make an impact. We certainly make an impact, and not just through our service work or just through philanthropy, but a lot of the decisions that we make create an impact in the world. And you were talking about setting goals, for example, like, know what your 5-year plan is, but hold that loosely. We set that 5-year plan not necessarily thinking that we're going to achieve it in 5 years, but it gives us some benchmark to say, we're going to achieve that goal. That goal matters to us. You have to set it to know what you're working towards. We've found that when we set those 5-year plans, we achieve them early. And so that's the thing, you have to work towards something, and you have to make those plans. And I think that, as a web agency, the thing that makes us really different is the things that we're targeting, the things that we set goals for are very impact oriented. They're very impact driven, whether that's just corporate social responsibility, environmental impact, social impact, how we interact with our team, how we interact with our community. Last year, for example, we did an assessment and didn't know how many women-owned businesses we partnered with. Not just from clients, but also from our supply chain and vendors that we work with and contractors that we worked with. We hadn't measured it. And so we said, well, we want to know the number. What is the number? Well, how many are we working with? And it was a dismal 3%. And I was shocked, because it's not like I don't support women-owned businesses. We're a women-owned business. And it's something that I care about. It's something that Michael cares about. It's something that our team cares about, but we just hadn't measured. And so if we hadn't set a goal around it, we hadn't measured it, then we don't know really how we're making those decisions. And so now, as we look at our supply chain, or as we look at, who are we sourcing this out to, who are we getting this resource from, we ask questions about, is this a local company? Is this a woman-owned business? Is this a minority-owned business? Is the veteran-owned business? And we ask a lot of questions now that we didn't ask before, and we measure that as criteria. And so it's not just the work that we do is creating an impact with the projects that we're building and the websites that we're building, but it's also how we operate as a business that's making an impact. And we hope that people choose us not just because of the type of websites that we can give to them, but also the impact that they're making by supporting us as a company.
Yeah. I recently had a conversation, a previous episode, with Nathan Stux, and he's a head of, or a part of, organizing basically B Corp organizations in Georgia. You are a certified B corporation, but you are also a public benefit corporation. Those things we determined in that episode are different. They are different beasts. You have chosen to go down both paths. Tell me about that decision and why that's important to you specifically, in Cause Labs and your clients in general.
So one is the legal entity, as you may have addressed in that previous episode, and one is the certification, where we get audited every 3 years. the legal entity, that part of it, that became possible in I believe September of 2017 in the state of Texas. And so as soon as that was available, because we were already a certified B Corp, because it definitely aligns with our values, I wanted to make sure that we were a PBC. And so in the state of Texas, we're actually Cause Labs PBC. You know how you have to have that uh, attachment at the end of LLC or
Incorporated, LLC, yeah.
incorporated, or right. So I wanted it to be PBC because I wanted people to see that, this matters to us. And we're also very big advocates for any business can do this. Any business can commit their company to being an impactful company. You don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit or work only with nonprofits to make impact within your company. And it could be small things, but if every business does a small thing, altogether, we've done so much for our communities, so much for our state, so much for our country, so much for the world. And so that's why the legal entity was important to me, was just to continue to be an advocate for that within the business space. The certification side of it and being audited for those criteria and taking that assessment, which can be a grueling process and take multiple weeks and multiple team members, is important to me because it helps me measure these things that I was just talking about. Not knowing what my score was on how many women-owned businesses I worked with, I was like, how do I not know that? But there are just things that as business owners, we get mired in the day-to-day, like we've got to release this project. I've got to have this call with this client. I've got to schedule this meeting. I've got to, get this information to my CPA for taxes. Like there's so many things, but at least doing this allows us to focus on some of those impact measurements, and it kind of bakes it into how we operate as a company. And so we're thinking about it throughout the year so that we're not waiting till that time when we do the audit of like, oh my gosh, we have to pull 3 years worth of data. No, we like measure, every month and every year, and we have an impact report yearly. So we can just pull those reports and fill out our assessment. It makes it a lot easier. But it means that we have to commit to actually measuring those things. And every year I continue to improve and I continue to learn something new. And for me, I don't necessarily want to work for a business that's not making an impact. And because I lead this kind of business and it's so important to me, then I want to be held accountable to that. And if you're not held accountable to anything, then you're not going to try to make a change. And you can't, grow unless you're aware of what you're trying to grow. And
Yeah.
you can't improve unless you're actually measuring what you need to improve.
No, I love the idea around public benefit corporations and B Corps. I love the idea of measuring what matters and determining what what do you want to be known for as a company. One of the things that we talk a lot about, and the thing that I'm primarily focused on, is organizations who are trying to make the lives of their team as fulfilling as the lives of the owners. A lot of us as owners, we set out, we have a vision, we have this idea, we have this dream, the businesses that we create afford us the lifestyles that we find fulfilling. And I always think to myself, when I'm hiring and when I bring someone onto the team, that person wants the same things I want. Like maybe they're not defined the same way, but they want fulfillment, they want flexibility, they want a meaningful life, they want purpose, they want to be passionate about what they do, they want to know that what they do has an impact and is making a difference, and they want the same things that I want. And so my goal is always to figure out, how do I help my team members experience that same hit of fulfillment, if you will, every single day. As a public benefit corporation, as a B Corp, how does that change the dynamic and the culture of your team? Like, how does that impact the internal workings of your culture every day?
Well, I will say our first set of interview questions are actually core value questions. And so we don't even interview for their skill set before we interview for their culture fit and the fact that they're aligned with our core values. If they're not aligned with our core values and they're not passionate about that and they could care less what kind of projects they work on, this isn't the right fit for them. Especially in a services agency, there are fires that we have to put out. There are times when it's like, this project is going to be late if we don't hunker down and get this fixed. And there are those stressors. Maybe that's any agency, maybe that's products as well, but definitely in services, there are times when it gets hard. And when it gets hard, we have to lean on those values. And so if there's somebody on the team that doesn't align with that, then it's not a great fit for the team. And that allows us to be just kinder to one another. One of our core values is radically respect. And in that core value, there's some bullet points underneath of it. And one of them is be kind, not nice. Too often, I feel like, especially in the impact space, like we're so nice all the time. Like, I just want to be nice to you. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. But being kind allows us to come to the table and have our differences and talk things out and work together and be respectful and appreciate the perspective that each person brings to a conversation or to a challenge. It also allows us to kind of clear the air and have that clearing of like, I have this conflict with you, but we're going to talk about it and we're going to clear it and then we'll be fine. We'll be able to continue working together without this sort of unsaid grudge that I'm holding against you. And so I think it's really important just to outline those values in a way that is just kind of baked into the culture of the company. And so that's, we think about that even from the hiring process at the very, very beginning. In the process where we have to let team members go also, that's something that I have had to learn. We also follow a lot of traction processes. And there's the, gets it, wants it, has the capacity for it. I don't know if you know much about traction. And there are times when I'm like, they get it, they want it, and they have the capacity for it, but there's this fourth layer of, but they're not necessarily living within our values anymore. And so what's the breakdown here? Like maybe they don't have the same capacity that they used to, capacity kind of being the skill set that they have. They might have the right skill set, but maybe I'm not selling the right kind of work for them anymore. Maybe we've changed in the services that we provide. Maybe it's just not the same fit. Maybe they're not passionate about it anymore. Maybe they've kind of moved on with the things that they care about, from a skill set perspective. And so recognizing that even someone that has tenure with the team isn't living their best life and living, being their best selves all the time, and saying that at that point I'm holding them back from being able to do that by not allowing them to move on to another position.
So I love EOS. If anybody wants to learn more about it, the book Traction, you can find it anywhere books are sold. And it's a great book. And there's some great principles there. And the idea of get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it. We have our own that's probably the same thing. We call it FIT. We were looking for the right fit in our organization. And those are people who have the right faculty, the right initiative, and the right temperament. Temperament comes down to our values, and initiative is the I want it, I'm willing to do what it takes, and faculty is is that capacity. I have the capacity to do the job. And so we evaluate on those same things. You talk about hiring and firing based on your core values. On Cause Lab's website, if anyone wants to look at it, you have a list of your 5 company values. Do work that matters, commit to excellence, radically respect, embrace possibility, and aspire to inspire. And you said you ask value questions right at the very beginning of your interview process. I'd love to take a glimpse kind of behind the curtain of what those interview questions might look like, because these values, obviously the words matter internally, and there's probably a lot of messaging there, and there's a lot of writing up, and a person who just applies to your job might not connect immediately with what does radically respect mean to Cause Labs and the people who work at Cause Labs. What do those questions look like? How do you dig into the value of people as you're hiring them?
Yeah, so we actually are very kind of open ended with those questions. Like the first one is, what does do work that matters mean to you?
Okay.
And sometimes, I think people give us the answer they think we want to hear.
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, I volunteer in my community, and it's I work with underserved children, and of course we care about those things. That's great. So love that you do that. But being able to kind of tie that into how you live that out in your day to day work is also something that we're listening for and looking for. We're seeing, oh, well, pushing pixels isn't, the reason that I am creative. I'm creative because I want to be able to give people an experience that's easier for them, that, they relate to a website in a way that, really reaches them, and in a way that, maybe other websites aren't as accessible for them. Like we listen for things like that. We listen for
Yeah.
how they tie that into the capacity of what they're able to do.
Okay. I love it. How do you I'm curious, like you ask those questions. I'd love to know a little bit more. How do you actually implement those values, and how do they affect not just who you bring in the organization, but actually how you do your work? Those values, I love them, by the way. They are everything that I look for in core values. They're memorable, they're minimal. There's not too many of them. They have a great phrase. I feel the meaning behind them immediately. I love everything about them. How do you constantly reinforce those values? Because one thing as a leader, and you've probably heard this and read this as well, right? We talk about, like, leaders are CEOs, are also CROs, the chief reminding officer. One of the things we're constantly trying to do is remind our team of what our values are. And it's not just putting them posters on the wall. How else do you reinforce your values every day within Cause Labs?
Well, we have a remote team, and we do ask them that they print them out and that it is on their wall. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the poster on the wall is important. It's a piece of
Sure.
like just visualizing and seeing that every single day. I think that, that visual reminder is one piece of it. The other thing that we do, we have Slack as a team, we have a remote team. And so we have a kudos channel. And we can also hashtag kudos with core values. So if somebody has done something on the team today and it relates to one of the core values, they can hashtag it with the core values. We run reports on the kudos, and as well as some of the other internal tools that we use. And there is usually a Cause Labber of the quarter. So we do what we call a state of the lab every single quarter. And during that, we choose one person who has lived out our core values, maybe not necessarily more than any other person, but has been, perceived as living them out more, just because of how people have recognized them in kudos and things like that, or the efforts that they have put forth towards helping the company really live out those values. And so we select one person every single quarter, and sometimes they'll receive a small bonus associated with that, or sometimes we'll do a charitable gift in their honor associated with that. And so that's just one way. We do, like I said, that quarterly state of the lab. And so they get a reminder of those core values in that presentation. We also tell stories about how that core value is lived out by our clients. So for us, the core values aren't just internal either.
Yeah.
It's personal, it's team, but it's also clients, vendors, suppliers. Like we like to tell stories about how clients missions and projects, and how those really relate back to our core values, because we don't just choose any clients, and we don't just say yes to anyone. And so being able to say, this is the impact they're making. This is how that relates back to Do Work That Matters, or this is how this relates back to Radically Respect. It's really important for us to see that and be able to tell those stories. We also obviously post them on social media and relate those stories to that. I would say that we kind of post them everywhere. In our
Yeah.
office, the core values are on our wall. And then the other thing, Aspire to Inspire, is a big one for us. And so in that respect, every time we're speaking, every time we're sharing resources, every time that we're, maybe with the WordPress community, I know you're in the WordPress community with us, there is a level of giving back to the community, right? And for us, that is aspiring to inspire. Like, how have we given back to the community? How have we not necessarily just dollars, but time and talent and mind share? And did you go on social media and answer somebody's question about how they're having a problem with their website? All of these things are aspiring to inspire. And sometimes it feels like small things. Well, I just answered her question. You might have saved that person hours of research, and you never really know the impacts that you have. And so just really practicing that on a daily basis. And like I said, those are very succinct versions of our core values. On our printout, we actually have, a tagline under each one. We have bullet points under each one. And, those are things that, don't change very often, like the bullet points, but sometimes, it may change to be more appropriate for the times. Once the team became fully remote, some things might change and be a little bit different. But yeah, it's how do you live this out every day? How do you see
Yeah.
yourself, achieving this in your day-to-day work? So not necessarily always in your personal life, although I will say that this kind of bleeds into our personal lives. We spend so much time at work doing these things. And if we're living out our values in the work that we're doing, we're likely to carry that forward also into our personal lives.
Absolutely. And this is probably a good segue as we start looking towards wrapping up. In pre-production correspondence, we were talking, getting ready for this episode, you made the statement, purposeful leadership doesn't always lead to personal fulfillment. And I read that and I felt the struggle in those words, and the challenge in those words. Can you unpack that a little bit for me as you think about being a leader, and obviously a very purposeful leader in what you do? What do you mean when you say purposeful leadership doesn't always lead to personal fulfillment?
Well, I think that people start with personal fulfillment first. In I don't want to speak for everybody, but I have seen that people start with, I want to start a business because I want to control my schedule, or because I want to make X amount of dollars, or I want to take care of my family. So these are like the personal goals that we have. And there's personal fulfillment tied to why we do certain things in leadership. And that's important because leadership is hard. So you have to have those reasons for doing it and sticking it out. But I think that, personal fulfillment isn't necessarily always tied to that. Purposeful fulfillment can be something that, you know, may be dictated upon you by the leadership of your company. So you can have, ways of fulfilling purpose and working within your company to achieve certain things. And those things aren't necessarily always the things that align with your values. And so I will say that, if purposeful fulfillment in a company is, making the owner millions of dollars, you may be doing that really, really well and great at your job. But when you come home at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have, um, personal reasons for wanting to do that, unless, maybe you're paid really well to do that. But you might be dissatisfied also, and so I think that there's just purposeful, like purpose is a word that isn't necessarily always aligned with our values. But if on the flip side of that, your leadership, requires you to track your environmental footprint, for example, like we do at Cause Labs. It might be something that you don't necessarily want to do and you don't really care about that much, but then, you're having to do it all the time and you're doing it and the company is achieving these goals. And, for Cause Labs, for example, like we pay for our teams like carbon footprint for their homes, like we pay offsets for that. And so we're a green company, but also we're a green team. And that may or may not bleed into like, wow, I think I'm going to change my habits for what I do in my personal life. I think I may actually change the companies that I shop with. I may make some different choices. Like, I will just say that those words, all of the jargony words that we use, can have both positive and negative impacts. And so I think it's important to define, positive purpose and positive fulfillment. And what does that mean to you? And how do your personal values and personal goals and personal fulfillment actually tie with, your work goals and your work purpose and your work fulfillment, and do those align, and are you on the same track there? And are you living two different lives? Because if you are living two different lives, you're never going to achieve personal fulfillment.
And
But if you can
that is a
align
huge
those,
challenge. Yeah.
if you can align those, then you can achieve both and be on this one journey towards both.
And that is a challenge to every leader listening, especially those who are leading teams. Your job is not to define fulfillment for your team members and what makes them feel whole in their roles. Your job is to find out from them what brings them fulfillment and makes them whole in their roles, and then help them make those things true. It's not, as an organization, you have objectives and you have goals and you have things that your company does and it's important to the company. And those have to be done and those have to be taken care of no matter, regardless of what everybody's personal and professional fulfillment goals are. But as a leader, you can find a way to marry their personal and professional goals to your organizational objectives and goals. And if you can find that marriage, if you can put those things together, you will have a flourishing business and a company that skyrockets and does well and succeeds because the people will be passionate about the company and the company will be good to its customers, and everyone kind of is rowing in the same direction and working together for that. I say this, I've said this in a previous episode. When leaders take care of their people will take care of the customers, and their customers will take care of the company. And all in all, we all win when we do that. So definitely a good word of advice to keep that in mind. Cheryl, I want to let you have the last word. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you? What is any parting words that you would like to share with the listeners?
So they can find more about Cause Labs at causelabs.com, CAUSELABS.com. Getting in touch with me, getting in touch with Cause Labs on social is also at Cause Labs everywhere. And getting in touch with me personally, I'm at Cheryl on Instagram, and that's the platform I'm on most. So you can direct message me there. I'm one of those people that actually got my name because I was on Instagram early enough.
I love it. I do that with most social platforms, but there are a few that every once in a while I'm like, that's not going to blow up. And I miss
there's no way you got at James, though. James is too common.
No, there's no way. There's no way. Even if I was on top of the platform right when it came out, I still wouldn't have been able to get at James. So, Cheryl, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and sharing your story and insight and caring as much as you do about purposeful leadership. I love hearing that energy, and I look forward to many, many more conversations with you. Thank you for being on Leading to Fulfillment.
Thanks, James. Talk more soon.
Talk more soon. What a great conversation with Cheryl that I hope everyone who listens will enjoy. Everything that we mentioned in this episode, including the full transcript of the show, is available over on our website, and you can access it anytime that you want at leadingtofulfillment.com/011. That's leadingtofulfillment.com/011. Also on that website, you can subscribe to our newsletter where we'll let you know every time a new episode goes live, as well as send you original and curated content on leadership and managing teams and finding fulfillment. Being a leader is a complex and complicated role. That fact can be magnified when you are called upon to lead where you were just recently a follower. After all, it's hard to be an adult where you were first a child, but it can be done. Successful leaders don't make it about them, but instead draw people's attention to a larger vision and a bigger purpose. They reinforce the values of the organization and help everyone see themselves in the greater cause. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode. And until then, may your businesses be successful as you lead your teams to fulfillment.